Welcome to the Hey Mom podcast. This show is hosted by me, Audrey, and my sister, Rhoda. Every episode, we will be interviewing our mom. She is our permanent guest. If you have a dilemma, problem, or situation you want a new perspective on, please write in and we will share it on the show. As always, you will remain anonymous. Please email us at heymompodcast121@gmail.com or DM us on our Instagram. Our handle is heymom_podcast. That's all lowercase. Thank you so much and enjoy the show.
Hey Mom. So today we're going to be talking about power and control. It's a concept we have talked about a lot recently and has literally changed my life. So I felt like that was something I really wanted to talk about on this podcast. So Mom, tell me about power and control.
Well, this is a topic that I recently got intrigued by because so many people use the word power and control synonymously, interchangeably, as if power and control are like slightly different expressions of the same thing. And as I begin looking more deeply into this concept of what is power, what is it? The more I discovered that the concept of control is actually almost the opposite of power. I think we attempt to control when we feel powerless. So the idea of control is our human attempt to feel power over a situation, a person, etc., when we feel powerless. Because if you have power, if you have real power, then you don't need to control. You trust that the power is sufficient to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. So the way that I define power and control is specific to me and how I'm using it and how I view it. So I'm not making any claims that this is the absolute correct definition, but it's helped me a lot to come up with a definition so that when I'm thinking about it and using it in my interactions, I have a clear picture of what the behavior looks like when you're operating from power and what the behavior looks like, or even the feeling inside of you when you're coming from a place of control. So my definition for power is a willingness to act or to take action without needing to direct the outcome or predict the outcome or even be too attached to any specific outcome. So it's the willingness to act without any of that assurance that your actions are going to produce any kind of specific result.
Mm-hmm.
The definition I have for control is taking action in order to get a specific outcome or to direct the outcome, to predict an outcome, and to be attached to an outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So those are how I've differentiated between power and control. And we don't realize how much we use control because we don't know how to access power.
Mm-hmm.
One of the key things that I've learned about power as I've explored it and looked at my own life and discussed with you and others about this concept is that power is inexhaustible. It doesn't have any edges. It's not finite. There isn't a limited amount of power.
Can't max out power.
No. But you also can't abuse it. And I hear the term abuse of power used a lot. But when I looked at this definition, I realized you can abuse power if you're looking at it through this lens. I think the abuse of power is actually control. It's a form of control. So abuse of power usually means something like coercion, violence, intimidation,
Manipulation.
manipulation. Those are forms of what we would call abuse of power, but that isn't power.
Right. So it almost doesn't even make sense with your definition, like, because abusive power is control.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think it's useful to think about it in that way because, funnily enough, it makes power more powerful. When you think of it this way, it's inexhaustible, it's untouchable, it cannot be corrupted, it cannot be abused, and the only way you can access it and exercise it is if your motivations are pure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think it's interesting that a common association with like true power is actually more commonly associated with actions of control.
Domination.
Yeah, and they're like, oh man, like that guy's got power. That guy's, he can, command a room and that kind of stuff. But like what I have found is that true power is often silent and not invasive and extreme.
Right. That has been what I've discovered too, is it's got a quiet authority.
Yeah.
So one of the expressions of power is influence. And if you think about a person who has genuine influence, that person is not trying to direct an outcome. As soon as you try to force an outcome or you try to get people to do what you want them to do, think about advertisers. If you're going to have real influence, you have to be unattached to whether or not people buy your product. You just believe in your product and you present it with all of its qualities in a way that trusts other people are going to like this product too, because it's actually a good product, rather than trying to manipulate or trick people or just get in people's faces and be obnoxious.
Mm-hmm.
So I think about it even in ways like that are non-personal. So we see power and control everywhere around us in almost every setting. There is this opportunity to operate from a place of power or to operate from a place of control.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for myself, I used to call myself a control freak. And this was even after I came to accept that I was somebody who needed to have a lot of control over situations. And it was an admission of a character flaw. But after thinking about it in this way, I realized I just felt powerless. And control gave me a false sense of security over my situations, but I also had to maintain control.
And which is exhausting.
Very.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think understanding it from that perspective, I started looking at my life through that lens. As when I wanted to control a situation or I wanted to get a specific outcome, I would remember that I was feeling powerless. That moment I was recognizing I don't feel like I have the power to get what I want or need. And because I feel that way, I need to control the situation.
Yeah. So I think this is a perfect segue into talking about a very common thing that people find themselves in, a lot of power and control dynamics in love relationships. So is there any example of a dating scenario in which someone could give an example of how you go from a control mindset to a power mindset and how it can change an outcome?
Oh, I think in the dating world, most people date with a controlled mindset. And why wouldn't you? You're only dating to get an outcome, right?
Yeah.
And so it makes sense. It almost seems expected that you would go on a date in order to meet someone that you had an attraction to, maybe you could hook up with, maybe you could form a relationship with. It's all centered around getting a specific outcome, which is why I think it's such a disaster in today's world.
To begin with.
Yeah. I mean, look at the dating apps.
Mm-hmm.
They're designed for you to feel like you have control over the dating environment, over the people, over what they look like. It's an emphasis on.
Right, because setting up your profile, you're picking their age, their ethnicity, how much they make in a year, all that stuff.
Yep.
When it turns into a game, because you get to control a game.
Right. All you have to do is follow the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to win or lose, which is all about control.
Mm-hmm.
So in power, you let go of the outcome. You're not attached to the outcome at all. And so the focus is returned to the self, to the individual. So how I show up on that date is far more important than what happens on the date. And you stop looking at how the other person responds to you as evidence of whether or not you're succeeding or failing. If you're coming from a place of power, you're focused on your own authenticity, you're being genuine, honest, you're returning to your personal values and trusting that if you operate from that place of power, that a positive outcome will result. It may not be the outcome you thought you wanted. It will always be a good outcome because your motivation is good. You planted a seed that was based in principles of being true to yourself, being genuine, being honest, being respectful, etc. That behavior will always produce something good. It's just you don't get to decide what the good thing is.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to let go of that attachment to the outcome that might look like, hey, if I'm really nice to this girl, and if I pay for her dinner, and I say all the right things, she's going to like me. She's going to text me the next day. She's going to want to date me.
Like this equals that. That's the game. That's the rules. And that's the expected outcome in dating.
Right. So it takes a lot more trust in yourself that you can handle whatever happens. Because sometimes what happens is that person doesn't text you the next day. And you accept that that doesn't mean anything about you. Because your job was never about the outcome. You were never trying to get that girl to call you or text you the next day. So that means if she calls or texts you, great. If she doesn't, great. Because you were not doing what you were doing to achieve that outcome. But I think it's hugely tempting in the dating environment to operate from control and not from power, because power actually looks like maybe apathy or you're not trying very hard.
Oh, like the I'm too cool to care kind of facade.
Yeah. But if it's a facade, it's a disguised form of control.
Yeah. Why do you think that the kind of cool and in control, I don't really care thing appeals to women a lot more than it does to men? Not saying it doesn't appeal to men. We're all different. But I'd say generally there's like this attraction for women and find an appeal of like, oh, he doesn't give a shit. Like, why am I in love with him now?
I think because it's disguised as power. Because imagine if that person really didn't have an attachment to whether or not you called them, whether or not you were attracted to them, if they were really so secure in themselves that that was not important, that's hugely attractive. Power is very attractive. And I think for people in the dating world, it's sometimes hard to identify what is real, authentic power when someone is disguising control as power. And as soon as that person realizes this is a game, they'll try to figure out the rules of the game, and then both parties are caught in a control dynamic instead of a power dynamic, which is one where genuineness and authenticity are at the forefront of the interaction.
So, can you explain what a control dynamic in a relationship looks like and what a power dynamic looks like in a relationship?
In a dating situation or a relationship?
Let's do dating. Let's do more long-term. You've created this power dynamic or control dynamic with your long-term partner. What can that look like?
You will have a long list of expectations of that other person and of yourself. And everything that you do will be contingent. So it's, if I do this, I will get that.
And they've been reinforced in that long-term relationship that that will happen. Or
for sure.
Yeah.
Because if both parties are operating from control, then they're understanding this is the rules of the game. And if she wants to go out to dinner or she wants me to do the dishes for her, then I know that she's going to be nice to me or she's going to sleep with me or whatever the reward is. So it's almost like if I press the right button, I'll get the right reward. And so these control relationships are all about training your partner to hit the right button, and then you will give them the right reward. But the problem is there's no authentic connection because there's no uncertainty. There's no risk. There's no power. And so there's no connection. And then people say, I just got bored. Well, yeah, you're playing a game where you learn the rules. And after a while, it's pretty boring just hitting those buttons and you know exactly what you're going to get.
Right.
There's nothing real in it because control is not real. It's a substitute for real power. It isn't the real thing. And so in that way, it's false.
Yeah. So that would be a control, and it's typically it's both people playing the same game with each other.
Yes.
It's not very common to have just one person that's just like, I'm going to train you, and the other person be like, oh, because they just kind of have to be a robot not to participate.
Right. And I would say actually it's more unusual for you to have both parties in the same control dynamic. If you have that, there would be very few problems. There would be very few issues in that relationship, but it would feel stale and get boring very quickly. Now, most of the time, what I see is one person is trying to control and the other person isn't. One person is more prone to wanting to control because they feel powerless. The other person isn't as much. Or they're both playing a game. They're both trying to control, but they have two different agendas. So one person might be trying to control their actual partner. And the other partner may be trying to control the situation rather than a person. So two different forms of control. This creates massive amounts of conflict. It's almost like you're playing two different games, but telling each other you're playing the same game.
Yeah, so that's why you can have control relationships that seemingly seem unproblematic. And
Right.
they seem like they get along, but they're bored.
Yep.
And then you have people playing two different games of control but think they're playing the same one.
Right. And
Which
those are
tons of tension and conflict.
full of drama.
Those are the burn hot, fizzle out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So what would a power dynamic long-term couple look like?
Well, these are the most alive, vibrant relationships that you could possibly have because you're living in a state of uncertainty and curiosity and openness with the other person, but you're always operating from a place of trust, trusting in yourself. In this kind of a relationship, you would not have any expectations of your partner. Your partner would have no expectations of you. Everything you did would be a surprise, a gift, a wonderment. You could certainly opt out for something that maybe you didn't like. Maybe the surprise was something that you weren't really into. But there's no attachment to how the other person should react. So if you say, I want to go see a movie, do you want to go with me? And your husband or boyfriend says, I'm not feeling it. I don't really want to go see a movie. And if you're in a place of power, you weren't attached to going to see that movie with him in the first place. So his answer can't disappoint you. You were just curious and open before you asked, I wonder what he'll say. And you totally accept his response without any need for it to be different because you know that whether or not he goes with you doesn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a relationship without compromise, without personal compromise. It's a relationship without expectation. It's a relationship where both parties are completely free, but the possibility of connection is very, very high because there's risk involved. If there wasn't risk, which there's not much risk in a controlled game, then when you have risk, you have connection. You have the possibility of connection, I should say.
Yeah, risk invites engagement.
Yes. And it is uncertain.
Which is exciting.
Very. And so you never get bored in a relationship like this because you're always open to whatever might happen and you can't really be disappointed or let down because you're open to any outcome. You're not trying to control any of the outcomes.
Yeah. So my next question, which I think a lot of people might be interested in, is that relationships are all about needs.
Right.
And I think when we're talking about power, it sounds like needs are put on the back burner. It's like, oh, you don't want to go see the movie with me? Okay, I guess we won't see the movie. I wanted to do that. Like in that scenario, how can that person get their need met without the expectation of that person giving them a specific answer?
Well, I think first of all, believing that someone else can meet your needs is a powerless belief. It removes power from you and places power in the hands of another, at least in your own mind. So you, my significant other, are responsible for making me feel good, feel loved, feel accepted, and none of those things are true. So even though this may sound a little abstract, we have to recognize that we can meet our own needs first, and to have our needs met by another person is a profound gift. It's a beautiful act of service and love. It is not a requirement. As soon as it becomes a requirement, even if that person is so-called meeting your needs, it loses a certain specialness, and you find yourself feeling even a bit disappointed. Like, yeah, he went to the movie with me, but did he really want to go?
Mm-hmm.
Was he really into it? I noticed he didn't comment on it because you wanted the authenticity. You wanted what was real, but you opted for the substitute because you thought it was their responsibility to meet your need of connection and doing something together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I guess ultimately it is about, can I meet my own needs? Can I ask for my needs to be met by my partner? And am I willing to accept whatever that person does or doesn't want to do as acceptable? Can I make that okay, whatever the answer is?
Mm-hmm.
Because to truly meet a need for another person, desire has to be present.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's not actually meeting a need. It's just performing, paying lip service, but not actually being real. And then we get our feelings hurt, and it just complicates everything because your partner compromised themselves and went to a movie when they didn't want to, thinking that they were meeting your need. But they weren't, because you didn't need them to pretend that they wanted to go when they didn't.
Mm.
You needed an authentic connection. And they were unable to provide it for you in that moment. And in a healthy relationship where there's power on both sides, you accept that person's answer because it's the truth. I can't connect with you in this way at this time, the way you're asking me to. But when you accept it completely, then you look inward. How can I meet this need for myself? Maybe you don't really need to go to a movie. Maybe you were just looking for a connection. So then you shift gears a bit, if that's the case. And you think, well, I want to be connected with this person. What might I do that will bring me that sense of connection? If you're not attached to the movie and going and seeing the movie and all that means that you've created in your mind, if he says yes, it means this. If he says no, it means that. If you're not attached to any of that and you understand the deep need is connection, you're open to anything. And you're taking care of yourself by being flexible and thinking about how to meet those needs. And you may even find that you just need connection with a loved one, not even your partner.
Mm-hmm.
That the need isn't even that specific. But you have to get really clear with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think that was a thing I currently deal with, because in my dynamic with my husband is very much I'm the control party. He's less of a control party. And I just find that I am constantly looking for my needs to be met through him. And so there's like disappointment when he doesn't meet my need. And then I get frustrated and then I get angry of like, oh, do you want to go like get in and out with me? And he's like, no, like I'm on the couch. I don't want to get up. I already ate. And I'm like, okay. And so in my mind, it's immediately, you don't get in and out. The thing that you want, you don't get it anymore because he's unwilling to go with you, which is dumb. I understand, because I have a car, I have a license, I can go drive myself. But
It wasn't about in and out.
yeah, although that feels like the immediate need that I kind of get attached to. And then I just can't let it go. And then I angrily go get my food. That's what I've done in the past. But yeah, so like I relate to people that struggle with expectation. Like, you're in good company.
How are you currently working with that? If you use that example, what are some things that you've learned through some of our discussions and all of that to handle that situation in a way that gives you what you need and doesn't encroach upon him or make any requirements of him?
I mean, something I've been working on is because like I get hangry. Like I'm one of those people. And so what it involves food, which is a common occurrence in my relationship, is going and getting food on the weekend and getting attached to like going to specific places. Something that I've tried to kind of like help myself is to have multiple options. Okay, this is like what I want. And like going out to get food is a connection thing for me. But I want it to be authentic. I want it to be, you want to because you want to spend time with me. The food is great. And like I do need it a little bit because I get hangry. But when I'm trying to let go of the outcome, I make sure there's something in the freezer, there's something in the fridge that is an alternative. And then more recently, I had an interaction where I let go of the idea that he was going to say no or that he was going to say yes. And I decided to take a more creative approach to asking in the first place. And it got me a better outcome. You know, even though I didn't have a backup in the fridge that time. So I was like pulling out all the stops, getting creative.
Right.
And it like caught him off guard. It was like, whoa, like she's never like gone all out to get my attention, to get me to convince me to,
So would you say that you were being playful?
Yeah. I used playfulness rather than a feeling of defeat. Because like, will you please, it's like I decided to just go to the full send.
Performance mode.
Yeah. And he was cracking up. He was getting a giggle out of it. And he was just like, yeah, we can go.
So he responded to that playful interaction. It is very likely that he enjoyed it so much that shifted his desire.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to go with you because he liked the sense of connection that your playful approach had, because play, even by its definition, is to do something without expecting a particular outcome. So play is a form of power.
Mm-hmm.
So using a playful approach, I think, is a really great way of dealing with situations in a relationship. As long as there isn't an ulterior motive that me being playful is going to get what I want.
Right, because I also have to remember the next time I'm in that position that I don't start using playfulness as a way to get my needs met through him.
Right, because it will stop working.
Yeah.
Pretty
immediately.
The minute you are trying to exert control or have an expectation, the other person can feel that, and it's a huge turnoff.
Mm-hmm.
Because nobody wants to be controlled. Nobody likes the feeling of this expectation or this burden that they have to be a certain way or say certain things. Really, other people can't truly meet your needs. Not really.
Mm-hmm.
I think other people can amplify or how do I say this? Enrich your experience of having your needs met. I don't want to downplay the value of someone in your life that is doing something for you that really fulfills you. But only you can really meet your own needs.
Our last topic is what would you say? The 4 types of control or power?
Right. I would say that's exactly it. There's different ways different people try to exercise control. And most people think control, you're a controlling person. What they're really just talking about is control of people. Think about a dominating personality type. There's so much more nuance in this concept of control than just trying to control another person. That's the most overt and obvious form of control, where you're forcing someone to do or say or be a certain way, or you're using tactics like intimidation to get what you want. People are afraid to stand up to you. You're kind of a bully. Those are just, that's just one form of control. And I find that people who aren't like this often are surprised to discover that they also are using control and that they are as big a control freak as the rest of us. It's just what they're trying to control is different. So once I started to see that certain personality types have different methods of control, then I wanted to articulate them and look at what were the general categories of control for the different personality types, you might say. So you definitely have the domination, control of people, using like coercion. And
I think that's the most common association when someone says control.
yes, the more subtle one, but probably the more ubiquitous among humanity, is control of situations. And this almost always involves compromising yourself or running circles around the other person, doing everything that you need to do to maximize the possibility of you getting what you want. So thinking that if you do all of these external things, that you're going to have this sort of passive control over the person's cooperation or how they treat you. And I see this in individuals sometimes with, if I'm really accommodating, if I'm really nice, if I always say yes, if I'm very flexible, if I never cause any problems, if I'm not a drama queen, that those things will earn me certain rewards. And personality types like that are a bit shocked to find that they have just as much a need to control as the individual who's trying to dominate people using fear and manipulation.
Yeah. Okay, so first one would be control over people.
Yes.
Second one is control over situations.
Yes.
What's the third one?
The third one is control of perceptions. So this form of control is all in appearances, how others see you and what others think of you. These are the people that are obsessed with reputation and compliments, like, did that person even notice me? Or, you buy a new dress and you're like, my husband didn't even notice that I bought this new dress. You're trying to control perceptions. You want to be seen in a certain way. Maybe in this case, you wanted to be seen as attractive. And so you're looking for the validation from that other person that you are that. Or maybe you're just a big flirt. And flirtation is a way to control perceptions. I mean, there can also be healthy flirtation. So I'm not saying that it's flirting itself, there's anything strictly controlling about it. But it's a form of exercising control because you're trying to get a specific outcome. But you're trying to get that outcome through control of perception.
Mm-hmm.
So this type of a person will hide a lot. They'll hide who they are. They'll have ulterior motives. They will not be very transparent and open. They'll be much more of a closed book. And they'll have a secrecy or secretive nature about them because they can't let anybody see who they really are. So they're controlling perceptions like that. The power for an individual struggling with this type of control would be a willingness to be yourself, to just show up in all your flaws, in all your humanity, to be genuine, to be totally authentic. That is very scary for a person who's trying to control perceptions. The fourth is control of autonomy. And so for personalities like this, they resist anything that looks like rules, somebody telling them what they can and can't do, somebody setting a timetable. This has to be done in this amount of time. Or other people making plans for them. Them feeling like they have to, that their freedom and their ability to do what they want in the time that they want to do it is being restricted. So they will resist that, and their need to control their autonomy is expressed through unpredictability and unreliability. So they become very unreliable, almost intentionally unreliable, to keep people thrown off. They don't want anybody to rely too much on them because it threatens this feeling of freedom of movement and the ability to control their own time. Really, it's about time, it's about movement, all of that. And the power there is found in your power to choose. So a person who feels control, like they need to control their autonomy in this way, feels powerless to choose in situations, inside of situations, where they may have more restrictions than they're comfortable with. The more restrictive the environment is, the less they feel they have the power to choose. So those are kind of the 4 different modes of control that I notice in people, that I think the control of situations is probably the most common.
Surprisingly.
And, control of other people is less common because it's really problematic. And
It's typically like nipped in the bud socially.
yes.
To be like, you're bullying, knock it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can become ostracized, or there can be other kinds of.
So what's a corrective method for people who find themselves trying to control other people? Because we talked about 3 and 4, kind of like their corrective methods. What would you say for 1 and 2?
Well, I think the power for someone who is trying to exercise control over another person is influence. So this is the type of person who likes to take action, who likes to get things done, who likes to unite people, to bring people together, to inspire people to be more than they can be. But they do that through coercion. And they think they know what's best for everybody. So they'll use those coercive methods to try to get the best out of people. But in truth, they just want to be influential. And they don't realize, if they're coming from a place of power where they're acting without needing to get a certain outcome, that will have profound influence on everyone around them, because it's power, not control.
Yeah, I do seem like it seems to be very common for that people can step into that with no awareness and get that like amazing outcome. And then they now step into a control, like, how did I get that? How did I get that influence? How did I get those people to feel that kind of way? Because they've experienced the power, they're not recognizing it as the power. They're recognizing it now as, how do I get that back?
Which then they resort to control, like you said.
Right.
Because they thought that.
And I think that's applicable across all of those control methods, is that you'll accidentally step into the power of it sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And it feels really good. And it gets amazing results. And you weren't attached to any particular outcome, but the result was good.
And you weren't trying.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what about control of situation?
Well, I think control of situation is a little bit different, and I'll see if I can explain how I'm seeing this. But it's like the power to draw people to you. It's the power to summon. And in your case, when you're talking about the trip to In-N-Out or going and getting food with your husband, that when you use that playful approach, you were able to summon him from his place, what he was doing, video games or TV or whatever he had going on. You were using that power of playfulness and openness to summon him to your activity, to what you wanted to do, which is very different from someone who is trying to control other people's behaviors and using coercion and intimidation to get compliance or cooperation. For you, it was more about connection and support. So your ability to summon those things from that person without being attached to doing that, just knowing that you have the power to exercise that. And you do that by being fully committed to your values. So it's when you're committed to what your standards are, for you, like, I'm going to accept whatever the outcome is, and I'm not going to get upset, and I'm just going to have fun. Maybe you were committed in that moment to just being lighthearted, and it didn't matter if he said, yeah, I'll go with you, or if he turned you down, that you were holding yourself to a particular standard of behavior that you were unwilling to waver from. And it's that kind of commitment to yourself, to your values, that allows you to stay in a position of power and not flip over into control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this is, again, is another vast topic that we will probably be covering again in another episode. And anyone who wants to reach out with anything in particular they found interesting, any particular type of control they wanted something more in depth on, please feel free to do that. And I'll see you next time, Mom.
See ya.